Oh no. Like, even if I would stay, it's just not happening. Is my expectation. Oh no, someone failed. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, we're playing a variety of casters, because this happened on the day of Heavyweight Savage's release, and I happen to be a caster on that World First Race charity stream too. We did get a surprising amount of variety in duties, although due to queue times and lengthy duties, we only got just 10 this time around. Speaking of which, for duty 1, we were a 3-minute replacement in World of Darkness as summoner. Right around when we arrive at the first boss, 7 players drop dead, presumably from uncleansed dooms. On Cerberus, it took long enough for the players in the belly to get Cerberus stopped that a somewhat uncommon mechanic came up, which looks like a white or even grey light above most players in the raid. This is a very old school version of what many call friendship Doritos nowadays. Stand next to another player to avoid being punished. Aside from these things, this was a pretty normal World of Darkness run. For duty 2, we went to Furious Manners as Red Mage with Ilana. The fact that Red Mage has Scatter at this level, but neither of the fast AoE spells, really makes these pulls a bit awkward. On the bright side, we do manage to generate just enough mana for 2, almost 3 enchanted riposts, so that's something? For duty 3, we went to Blue Flames, Don't Handle Them, with Ilana and Tinali. And this one is actually a much better level for Red Mage, as you have all you need, including access to Verstone and Verfire, to get a decent rotation going. With both AoE and single target, you can also easily switch between the two as more or less targets are in range of the boss. And with a job like Reaper present, it very well might be more my job to deal with the AoE than the Reaper's job. For duty 4, we went to Seed of Sacrifice as an instant replacement. This is a solid time for a reminder on how Pyretic and Deep Freeze works. When Deep Freeze is incoming, if you're not moving when it lands, you're effectively stunned for a few seconds, while also taking a ton of damage. If you are moving, nothing happens. For Pyretic, if you do anything during the debuff's duration, you take damage for every infraction. If you do nothing, nothing happens. Since this boss sort of saves which one he will do and then springs it on you later, if you can't remember what he stocked, moving until you do know is the safest option, as Pyretic gains most of its damage by being repeatedly ignored, while Deep Freeze gets its damage from being forgotten about just once. This also came up as a question on the stream, so just to clarify, you can tell what element he will unleash because he will cast an Imbue spell at one point, and then the next time he uses Imbued Coruscants, that element is unleashed on top. Again, if you can't remember, assume it will be ice, and then act accordingly if you see fire. On a slightly different note then, when the active time maneuver happens in the intermission, if a single player fails the button mash, the whole party wipes. And yeah, that actually happened here. On the run back, we do get it right and also get the tank limit break just right, so no worries there. Throughout the second phase, I get some mild use out of the new modification making the single target melee combo ranged, but also during one such modification moment, the cones of LB1 end up overlapping when one of the healers and I stand a tiny bit too closely, leading to a double kill. Shortly after that, for the LB3s, the other Red Mage, in their haste to get out to the edge, ends up touching the edge and dies from a Meteor and Dot Tick combo. But after that is over, we manage to stabilize again and bring home the victory. For duty 5, we went to the new 7.4 dungeon, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. That said, we went to Mistwake as Pectomancer. Let's talk a bit about the mechanics of each boss. For the first boss, the Ihuykatumu Pass, the main mechanics are Thunder 2 and Bedeviling Light, and to some degree Petri Breath. Everything else is just classic raid wides, tank busters and stacks. First, Thunder 2 produces a bunch of circle AoEs in the arena, on top of putting an extra one on every player. These AoEs don't do that much damage, but more importantly, the lightning will break any rocks they strike permanently, and running out of rocks can lead to a wipe. What is quite interesting here is that the boss appears to never strike 3 particular rocks with the random lightning as a way to give players an option if the fight drags out really long. Assuming, of course, the player targeting circles didn't break those rocks instead. Bedeviling Light petrifies any players not hiding behind a rock, which causes them to promptly die from any damage taken at all, so it is one step removed from actual instant death. Petri Breath is similar to the Light, except instead being a cone rather than a room-wide AoE that is blocked by rocks. Just try to keep some of the rocks alive and it'll be great. The second boss, Amdusias, or Noodle Horse as I like to call it, also has about 2 standout mechanics. The first one being Thunderclap Concerto, which is essentially a 315 degree AoE with a body tail. The second mechanic that tends to cause trouble for me as well is Galloping Thunder. The best suggestion I can give on this one, at least for now, is to pay attention to where the boss dashes to first and which way it dashes after that. Lean to the opposite side because this means at the earliest the boss can dash at you again for the third dash, meaning you can lean away from the first dash with the aftershock explosions and then towards where the first dash was when the third dash comes at you, and after that you should be safe for the remaining dashes. Aiming for something early on in the sequence also means you can be done with the mechanic early, which is often safer. The last boss, the Thundergust Griffin, has mostly just one core mechanic, the Thundering Roar. Simply put, whenever this mechanic is used, the line AoEs always leave room for melees to keep uptime somewhere, so if nothing else, when in doubt, go towards the boss and look for a safe spot there. That said, when the boss is in the middle of the room, one of the bigger safe spots is usually in front of it. When it is instead on the edge, there seems to almost always be a safe spot within punching distance of the boss, up against the edge of the arena too. It probably comes as a little surprise that this run went very well. And also, did you know that Warrior can solo Mistwake synced? You're probably not surprised by that. For duty 6, we went to Praetorium as an instant replacement Black Mage. We once again engaged with the super jank that is level 50 Black Mage. So, lacking any mechanics to talk about, how about we briefly talk about some Black Mage tricks? As most players that has messed around a bit with the job knows, the general idea is Blizzard 3, Blizzard 1, Fire 3, and then spam Fire 1 using Firestarter procs as you get them. And of course maintaining Thunder. But there are 2 small tricks that can add a bit of variety to the rotation. The first one is that Flare is stronger than Fire 1 on single target, in raw power. This does mean that finishing Astral Fire states with Flare is a more reliable option than finishing with Fire 1 hoping for a Firestarter proc. Essentially, if you get the proc, Fire 1 is better. If you don't get the proc, Flare would have been better. And the difference is small enough on average that if for some reason you actually don't want to gamble, Flare suddenly skyrockets in value to finish Astral Fire with. Which brings us to the second trick, which I call UI1 B3 Swiftcast. The simple idea is that if you finish an Astral Fire state with an instant cast spell, then instead of casting Blizzard 3 normally, you use Transpose to switch to Ice and then Swiftcast to make Blizzard 3 instant. And then you cast it. This gains about 87 potency, which can add up over the length of a duty, as, with a bit of luck and a bit of foresight, this can be done every time you have Swiftcast, with 3 main ways to access the trick. The first one is if you happen to need to reapply Thunder at the end of the Astral Fire state anyways. The second option is if the last Fire 1 in your Astral Fire state happened to produce a Firestarter proc anyway. And the third option is if the second to last Fire 1 in your Astral Fire state produced a Firestarter proc, because at that point you would actually prefer to not gamble, as by concluding you won't get another Firestarter proc, you can simply hold the one you already got and use Flare first, then Fire 3, enabling the trick. Of course, if Swiftcast is on cooldown, all of this is moot, but it is an interesting little trick you can mess around with every minute, which adds a surprising amount of depth to the job. For duty 7, we went to Castrum Meridianum as Summoner, with Fern. And aside from messing around with finishing Aether charges with a Swift-casted Ruin, I don't think there's that much to say. Fern and I had a bit of a fun casual DPS race on packs and bosses, since our jobs are close enough in power that it is probably a somewhat fair fight. A bit of a myth floating about is that Emerald Ruin is entirely a damage loss, but at least at level 50, as long as you're auto-attacking, you need a pretty huge amount of spell speed to make Emerald Ruin outright worse than regular Ruin. So that is at least a positive. For duty 8, we went to Meso Terminal as Red Mage, with Fern again. A random tip for Red Mage that did come up for me on the first boss especially is the too many procs quote-unquote issue. If you're the type that wants to maximize all resources you're given, it might be difficult to convince yourself to use melee combos or even acceleration if you already have both of a stone and the fire proc, and sometimes this can perpetuate itself by you repeatedly getting new procs replacing the old, completely preventing you from using any of these tools. This itself can be a bit of a problem because of a stone of a fire proc represents 1 mana gained over Jolt and 20 potency, but sitting on full acceleration charges, or even a swift cast, can be worth more than that. And I probably don't need to explain how important melee combos are. And sometimes, those melee combos kinda just have to go out at specific times. So the lesson here is to sometimes just let yourself generate too many procs to keep the rotation flowing. On the second boss, since Fern was playing Dancer, there wasn't much of a race to be had, since Dance Partner already gives me a huge edge, and no surprise, I finish my ad first, with the tank close behind. We help the healer and then come to finish off the last DPS ad. It is, at least in my experience, extremely common for dancers to finish last on this boss. Aside from this, the duty went super well. For duty 9, we went to Ihuykatumu as Pictomancer. A general tip for Pictomancer that sort of comes up especially on the final boss is about planning out your bursts based on what you can and cannot get away with, and still being flexible once you start. When you're still learning Pictomancer, you may feel compelled to open the burst with the hammer combo, since it may feel easier by being quicker and mobile. However, leading with the comets and subtractive palette spells to get them out of the way tends to be the safer path, as sometimes boss mechanics may force you out of your garden if you plan poorly, or just because bosses sometimes do that. So being finished with the garden earlier in the burst can prevent you from being put in that situation to begin with. I also conveniently managed to finish this fight with all of my paintings just barely on cooldown with nothing painted. Perfectly optimal, one could say in a way. And finally for duty 10, we went to Ramuh Extreme as Black Mage, with Agent Monica and Fern. On the first pull, most things that could go wrong went wrong. Some players didn't seem to clearly understand what to do about the Horrify effects. Easy, one of the tanks, didn't quite seem to grasp how tanking worked on this fight, putting a lot of extra pressure on CP. We also entered the ad phase with a Horrify not finished, which is a terrible start to the ad phase. Despite these issues, we got through that much. In the second phase, this also led to Rolling Thunder sticking around for longer than we'd like. Easy also ended up grabbing way more orbs than needed, misunderstanding how they work, culminating in a Rolling Thunder that we simply could not resolve, killing us all off one by one within seconds. On the second attempt, despite re-explaining the orbs, in a language we determined Easy understood, they still didn't quite seem to get it exactly, so they would totally overcharge on orbs at random. Due to vacuuming up all the orbs and not always picking up the boss on time, this again caused extra problems for CP. On this pull, we managed to exit the ad phase with a dead ninja, a tank with a weakness and Horrify debuff, but otherwise mostly fine, with plenty of orbs to handle whatever comes next. And then Easy takes a tank buster standing next to Agent Monica for the double kill. I get Rolling Thunder, and Horrify ended up moving on the Thunder instead of the Horrify, leaving me stranded out of view. Fern ends up dying to the tether, causing it to jump to a healer who promptly gets the orbs needed to neutralize it as I die to the circle AoE. This leaves us with just the tanks and healers, 3 of which are orbed up for better or worse. I get raised just in time for both healers to get horrified and me to get another Rolling Thunder tether, but this time I resolve the Horrifies first, and then run off to fix the tether, giving the healers room to just heal. Room they both use to get the last 2 DPS back on their feet. At the exact moment that everyone is fully topped up and healthy, Easy goes down to a tank buster. Right after, the ninja and Fern gets tethered together, while I and Fern get horrified. The fact the ninja was randomly using single target dodge-on tells me they might not be as aware of how the tether works as we might hope, and they hurt themselves, and Fern, by continuing their attack until they both go down during the blue circles. The Tether jumps Sage in Monica and the Sage goes for a run to fix that, while the White Mage hard reses Fern again. During this bit, it also seems like the tanks finally have gotten aligned, as Easy takes over tanking at the optimal time. As the team slowly comes back on their feet, another set of Horrifies and Rolling Thunders go out, with Monica able to solve the Thunder and a blue circle targeting the other healer on A as well. Right after Monica fixes the Tether, they die due to proximity to tank busters, unfortunately. A badly timed provoke combined with an unfortunately timed tank buster from the boss takes CP down just before they can get their protection up again. This time, while Easy overdid it, them taking orbs to maintain their debuff, while Red is still better than letting it drop in this current situation. Standing their ground with Holmgang also further gave the healers time to get CP back up, although that is almost sacrificing Easy, as with the Red debuff, only Benediction or Ryokoli could really help them. Yet another Rolling Thunder and Horrifies go out, stopping the White Mage. Thankfully, the Rolling Thunder tethered to a tank who wanted orbs anyway. Oh, and Ramuh is 1% from death, so we finally win with 4 Brinks of Death debuffs and a Weakness debuff. What an amazing performance, especially from the healers, but also CP. We didn't get quite as many duties this time around, but certainly some quality duties where stuff happened. We have also now passed 13/20ths of the way on the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, originally, Red Mage's acceleration was only on a 35-second cooldown, but its original effect from Stormblood didn't include the part where it increased damage from scatter or impact, and didn't include the part where it made a spell instant. It just guaranteed the Fire of a Stone proc.